So we're live streaming and now we're recording.
Thank you. This is the meeting of the Bylaws Committee of Community Board 11. It's January 9th, 2023. The time is 6:02 p.m. There is a quorum present. There are three people.
Hi, Joanne.
There are three
What are you
people.
talking about? Well,
Sandy, can you mute?
I muted her. Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you. Okay, so there are three members of the committee, and I'm present as well as Sandy Unger, so a quorum are present, so we're going to begin. The first order of business is to review the draft of the May 2022 minutes of the committee, which was the last time that we met, so I'll make a motion to adopt those minutes. Sandy, do you second that?
yes, and Joanne said she was having trouble getting on.
Jeremy, would you be able to assist Joanne?
I can try, but usually at this point, there's not much I can do. But I'll call her.
Thank you.
All right, see what happens. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, so Sandy, do you second adopting the minutes from May 2022?
Yes, I do.
Okay, is there any discussion on adopting
No.
those? Okay, and so then I'll call for a vote. Sandy, are you against adopting those minutes?
No, I'm.
Okay,
It's
then
fine.
I vote.
Fine with me.
I vote in favor, so it's passed unanimously. The minutes of May 2022 are adopted. The next item on the agenda are two bylaw changes. Per our bylaws, a member of the community board, I believe it was Miguel Dyer, had requested changes. He submitted them to the chair, who brought it before the full board, and the chair of the board asked that the bylaws committee consider these changes. The first change is to strike the last paragraph of Article 11 of our bylaws, and the sentence states, community board staff may only make public statements that reflect the official position of the community board. The second change is to change all of the masculine and feminine pronouns that appear in the bylaws to be gender neutral. So I'll make a motion to separately so that we can vote on it separately. I make a motion to strike the last paragraph of Article 11 of our bylaws. Is there a second?
I second it, David.
Thank you, Sandy. Is there any discussion?
No, not
Okay.
this one.
Okay, so then I'll call for a vote. I vote in favor.
And I vote in favor.
Okay, so it's unanimous. I'll make another motion to change all masculine and feminine pronouns throughout the bylaws to gender neutral. And is there a second?
David, I second it, but I have a question.
Okay, so that's in discussion. What's the question?
Right. Okay. Are we going to change it and put the words like he and him, she and her? How are we going to make it gender neutral?
I'm looking into the exact way that the city prefers that, but I do believe it is not to use the word he or him or she or her. It's to use gender neutral terms. I believe they or them.
Yep.
We'll get the exact language, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion?
No.
Okay, so then I'll call for a vote. I vote in favor of making the change.
And I second it.
Okay, so that passes. Okay, so that takes care of the bylaws that were proposed. There was some discussion I wanted to have on possible changes to other parts of the bylaws, but I think at this time I'll ask Jeremy, is there anybody who signed up for the gallery session?
Not that I know of, but do you have people here? I think somebody does
Right.
want to speak in the gallery.
Right, that's what I was getting to. So, okay, so we don't have anybody signed up for the gallery session, but we do have members of the community board here. We have Miguel and Naomi. So I'll ask if they wanted to address any questions or comments to the committee.
Yeah, I had a question, or I guess a concern, as far as how the chairs of committees are chosen. Um, I I just found out that there was a co-chair appointed to the ethics committee that I am on, and I found it kind of disconcerting that the members of the committee were not consulted whatsoever. And I was thinking that it would probably be more democratic if the members of the committee were chosen by the chair of the board, but that the chair of the committee were elected by the committee.
That's an interesting proposal. What I can tell you from my experience with the board is that as long as I've been a member, the chairs and the co-chairs have been chosen by the chair of the board. There is a section of the bylaws that allow that for committees to be created by the board, and I do believe at that time the board could also choose the chair of that committee. But that's it. That's an interesting proposal. Uh, a proposal like that wouldn't come directly to the bylaws committee. We could discuss it here, but if you wanted to make that formal change, then you would have to make it to the chair of the board. The chair of the board would raise the issue to the full board as a notification, letting everyone know that that request had come forward, and then it goes to the bylaws committee. So the idea being that the chair should not be should not be leaning on one side or the other. They should be passing it through. The idea of bringing it up to the full board initially is so that everyone is aware of it, can think about it, and then join this meeting of the bylaws committee. And I want to clarify the role of the bylaws committee in dealing with these kind of changes. I don't see the role of the bylaws committee as really coming down on one side or the other on substance. I see our role as the request has been made, and that we need to see how it fits into what the existing bylaw rules are, whether it conflicts with an existing rule, and if it does conflict and then moves forward to a vote of the full board, then it comes back to this committee to reconcile, how we deal with that. But we don't lean on one side or the other, and we don't stop anything, because our purpose here is not to say, well, a bylaw change has come and then we're not going to let it get out to the full board. The opposite. I see our role as the opposite. I just want to just extend one step further and let you know that when the bylaw change comes to the full board, according to our long-standing rules, the proposed change sits before the full board for 2 months. So the first month, it's put out there as a change, and everybody can think about it and ask questions. And then it's the second month after that that it actually comes up for a vote. That way, it has a chance to cook a little bit and people to think about it. And so, we can't have any hot-headed changes and say, I've made this change and we're going to take a vote and then it gets rammed through. It's a little bit of a process. So with that being said, does that address gives you a path to be able to make that kind of change?
Sure. Again, I'm new, so I'm not quite up to speed on exactly how all this works, but I would imagine that I knew that at some point it would come before the bylaws committee. So thank you very, very much for that clarification, and I will bring it up to the chair.
You're welcome. Sandy, did you have your hand raised? Did you want to be recognized?
No, I just wanted to let you know that Joanne is in the meeting.
I see. I'm glad you're able to join us, Joanne. Did you want to address the committee?
No, because I just got on like 5 minutes ago, so not really. And just basically here to hear what the, proposals are and vote on them.
Okay. Naomi, did you want to be recognized? Naomi? Okay. RD, MYB, is that Roxanne Delgado?
Yes,
And you-
that's me.
Okay, Roxanne, did you want to be recognized?
Yes, I would like to be recognized, but unfortunately, the motion was already made and voted on, so I guess public input was not considered for that motion.
Oh, well, would, please, I take your point. The gallery session, we should have had that before the vote. Please say what you wanted to say about that.
Well, my concern is regarding the last paragraph they state that was removed. I think it should just state that because a lot of people, well, not a lot, but several people made complaints that the district manager represented Community Board 11 at the BronxNet segment regarding Jeff Holmes. They felt that he did a very poor job in expressing the concerns of the community and the community board's position and the what was and the happenings at the public hearing. And I have to agree with them. Even though I support the Just Home proposal, I have to agree that the BronxNet segment was a disaster on behalf of the community and Community Board 11 sentiments. It was not accurate, in my opinion. So I feel like, and that's no problem because not everybody is a public relations person. Each agency has actually a paid PR who has that skill to communicate with the media. So I think perhaps you should prohibit without authorization beforehand any of your staff member or community board members to speak to the press without the consent of the board.
I appreciate what you're saying, Roxanne. I think though that the that rule that the community board staff may only make public statements that reflect the official position of the community board is it's been in our bylaws for a very long time. And I'm concerned about it because I doubt it could be enforced. I think at some level it violates the First Amendment to the US Constitution. I don't believe that we could make a rule that can prohibit any particular person, whether they're staff or members, from making statements. I think at some level that each person is responsible for the statements that they make, for accuracy and whether or not it falls within their job description to make such statements. But I don't believe that we can restrict a person's ability to speak in a particular forum.
Oh,
They-
I agree with you. I agree with you as a staunch proponent of the First Amendment. I'm 100% with you on that. I'm glad we can agree on that. I meant for your staff member to speak on behalf of the board. You can't stop the staff member from speaking to anybody. They're free to express their opinion as themselves or as their title as an employee, but to represent their statements as sentiments of the community or the board itself, I think needs to be authorized. And most agencies, when like say like Department of Health, in one of their PR, well, they have paid PR public relations person who are authorized to make private statement on behalf of the agency as a whole, not as the PR person herself or himself to make his or her opinion to any media. That was
Rob-
my concern.
Hi, this is Naomi. Can you give me an example of what you're stating?
Well, my example was with the BronxNet segment regarding Just Holmes. I think it was the former chair who selected the district manager to speak on behalf of the Bronx Community Board sentiments regarding Just Holmes proposal, and also and describe the public hearing and what happened at the public hearing. And many residents were very disappointed with that segment because they felt that it did not express accurately what happened at the public hearing and the sentiments of the board itself. And I, as one of the few outspoken proponents, supporter of that Just Holmes, I even had to agree with those residents that I felt that that Bronx segment was not a good reflection on what happened at the hearing, as well as at what was the community board's reasons why they were opposed to that project. I felt that it was very inaccurate. And I feel like when someone, when a paid staff member speaks to the media, their statement should be pre-approved, and it's done by it's not against the First Amendment. If your staff member wants to go haywire and go and blast you in media or press, they're free to do so. But I'm saying if they're going to make a public statement to the press regarding a committee board position, you should be pre-approved and approved for them to do so.
The only way, Roxanne, this is Sandy, if you want some change, is the person can say, in my opinion,
But
I
that's
believe
different.
this.
They could do
That's
that. They're free to
different.
do that.
Yeah, but maybe that's one way of addressing the situation.
But when they make an official statement to the
But
media on behalf of the board, that's
why
different.
were they making that? I didn't see the Bronx Net thing, but
Well,
why were
he
they
was not
representing?
he was not representing himself. He was not expressing his opinion on that proposal, which I don't know what his opinion is because he was not expressing his own opinion. He was expressing the board's, which is quite different from First Amendment.
Jeremy, did you want to comment on this?
So I think Ms. Delgado is correct in that I was tapped by the former chair of the board to speak on behalf of the board. Obviously, the board hadn't voted at that time, so it was obviously, and that was a very contentious public hearing that we had. That the interviewer had some very pointed questions. So I don't know how you would stop the chairperson of the board from tapping me to speak on the board's behalf. I really don't know.
Well, Jeremy, you raise an interesting point because on that particular issue, the board had not yet taken a vote. So if the if the chair of the board were speaking or any board member were speaking, they really couldn't speak on behalf of the board because the board had not taken a vote. We were still understanding the issue and asking questions about it, but only after the board has considered a formal motion one way or the other, is there an opinion of the board?
Yeah, which is basically what I said. The board hadn't voted, so I couldn't say. As far as I knew, the reactions were mixed. It was much more decided once the vote came out. But
Did the borough president's office weigh in on this afterwards?
weigh in on what? The Bronx? No,
About
actually, no, they weighed in beforehand because originally a board member was going to speak, and they,
Excuse me.
yeah, they weighed in beforehand.
No,
They
I'm not talking. I'm not just asking if the borough president's office weighed in on the substance of the issue, but whether or not they had a direction or guidance on how a community board can express itself if it hasn't taken an opinion on an issue.
So so let me clarify. So a board member was originally going to go to the BronxNet interview, and I don't think the borough president's office liked that idea because the member was clearly stated their position or whatever, one way or the other for the project. So as far as I know, the chairman at the time consulted the borough president's office, and they were okay with me going and representing the board. So
Okay. And you did so in consultation with and at the direction of the chair of the board.
yeah, I had personally no interest in going to that BronxNet interview, but the chairman couldn't make it himself. I don't think the vice chairman could make it. Basically, I was the next best thing, so to
Right.
speak.
So basically, the chairmans knew that you were going and that you were going to speak for them.
Well, I was going to speak to, obviously, the board did not take a vote, so I did my best. That's all
Right.
I
But you
do.
were speaking on, you were told or you were asked to speak
Yeah,
on,
I did not voluntarily. No, I was
right,
called. Hey, called me.
directed, that's the word I was looking for. You were
Yep.
directed by the board member, the chair, to speak on our
Yeah, I
behalf.
was asked to do it
Correct.
And I
because
think he was asked for the sense. I don't think it was I mean, I saw the piece. I don't think that there was no official statement by the board as of yet. And so I think that the interview was, they were asking for a sense of where the board was going. And I think it would be next to impossible to, well, actually not next to, it would be impossible to, to have any kind of answers prepared for that kind of interview. So I don't know how that would be, if there's a problem as far as people feeling as if, particularly people that are not board members, feeling as if that someone was not speaking for them. The opportunity for you to speak is here or at a full board meeting. I think
Not sure why you're taking a cheap shot at me. Some of those questions were asking about how
I
the
am not taking a
community.
cheap shot at anyone. I am
You do. You tend to
I'm making a
cheap
statement
shots at
that,
me.
Okay,
first of all, I'm speaking, miss.
conversation
All
professional.
right, but I'd
Miss,
like
I
to
am
just to
speaking.
address what I said. It's being
I am
misconstrued.
speaking.
Okay,
I'm speaking.
let's keep the conversation professional, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any way for there to be, any way to even have a prepared answers to an interview like that. I don't think, again, there wasn't any statement by the board. It wasn't even a vote at that point. So I don't think anybody was speaking for anybody. I think they were asking for a sense of where the board was, and I think that was clearly made clear.
Okay, Mr. Levin. So just to clarify what I'm saying, because it went to a different direction. I'm not sure who saw the Bronx Net, but I seen it, and so did other people. The question were asked not only asked about the Community Board 11 sentiment, and most of it was known because there was also held not only the public hearing. This was held after the public hearing at Jacoby Hospital, which was, I forgot, I think it was December. I can't remember exact date, but there was also a housing committee held before that public hearing, and also a association meeting held separate from the Community Board 11th meeting. And several Community Board members made it quite known how they felt strongly against the project. And these were key board members who are on the executive board level. Second, those questions also address how the community board, how the community, not board members, members of the public felt, and their opposition that was voiced not only at the public hearing in Jacoby, but in other meetings at the housing committee meeting. And the statements that were made were inaccurate. Lastly, it has nothing to do about me. I'm not saying I wanted to be on Bronx. I don't know why that was insinuated. I'm just saying that if the community board or the BP directs someone to speak to the media to express the sentiments of the community board members, which even though there was no official vote, most of us knew who were strongly opposed to it. They made it known their opposition, and for very reasons that were very exaggerated. And second, we were all at the public hearing, and I think most of us could describe what happened at the public hearing. And I felt that there was very inaccurate statements made, misrepresenting not just the community board, which is I'm not part of, I don't want to be part of, and I don't want to be part of the Bronx. I'm not sure why that's be. It's anyway, but also misrepresent the community as well. But let's let it go. I just made a suggestion. I'm not going to harp on it.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but let's look at it differently. If there was a change, a very specific change to be made to the bylaws, what would that change be?
That whoever's been directed or appointed to speak on behalf of the Community Board 11, and not only on their sentiments but on what occurred in their meetings, that they should be pre-authorized statements to be made or not to be made.
That I'm not following that. Could you break that down a little bit or simplify it?
Like for example, one of the questions that the host Gary Axelrod asked the Community Board 11 district manager was regarding a Facebook posting made by one of the board members on the executive level stating that we should visit the homes of the HSC board members, which was basically a very threat online. So when he asked the district manager, his response was not accurate. He said that you had to look into the context, but it was basically
That wasn't my response. Please don't mischaracterize me.
It said you have to look into the context. The chair is very adamant about reading the context. I mean, I could send you the link.
Yeah, okay, now I know what you mean. So he asked me a question
But I don't-
about this. Do you want me to respond or no?
If you want, Jeremy,
Online,
it's up
it's
to you.
online. You asked me for an example, I gave it, but I don't want to go back and forth with other board members who want to take cheap shots on me. I'm not here for that. I'm really not here for that.
Okay, nobody's taking cheap shots. We're trying to understand where you're coming
It's
from.
okay. It was just a suggestion.
Yeah,
But
no,
if you want to look
we
at other
appreciate
agencies
suggestions.
who have public relations
we're just trying
officers. Wait,
we're
let me just
trying to
finish my
understand.
sentence and I could end this now. They
No,
each agency.
you wanted an answer, so you just said you just stated that you were making suggestions and you want to end and people are taking cheap shots. I'm telling you that no one is taking a cheap shot at you. That's my opinion, right? This
Right.
is
I wasn't referring to you though.
country, so I can tell you that it's my opinion that nobody's taking a cheap shot. We're trying to understand. That's what we're trying to do. We're
For
trying
some
to
reason, Mr. Dyer tends to take
perspective.
cheap shots at me at
Yeah,
the
but
meetings. I don't want to go back and forth with him.
an opinion doesn't mean that people cannot disagree with you. I'm disagreeing with you because I feel that Jeremy was directed to speak for us. Okay, that's my opinion, but it doesn't mean that your opinion is not as valid as mine.
Well, actually, it's a fact that he was directed. I never disputed that.
Okay,
I
so
just said that if
that yes, but he was directed to speak that way, and you're stating it was inaccurate. That's subjective.
I say his statements were inaccurate, I never said he was not directed. That's a
Okay,
fact that
all
he was
right.
directed. That's not disputable.
We agree on that. So, but you're also stating that what he stated was inaccurate. That's
Yes,
also
and I'm not the only
that's
one. If you look at,
subjective.
sorry.
That's also subjective because I don't have
Okay.
in front of me disputing the inaccuracies. I don't have that.
Many people besides myself
Many people,
expressed their disappointment at that Bronx Next segment, but
but I'm
nonetheless,
glad to know
it's a
that. Glad to know that.
it's that it's the board's decision going forward if they appoint or direct someone to speak on behalf of the community board 11 and its meetings, that perhaps it's up to them. It's not, if you want to look bad, it's up to you. It doesn't make me look bad. I'm okay. But if you want, because most city agencies do go through the statements that could be made to the media. Now you can't be prepared for every question, of course not. But you could be prepared for the most expected questions. That's all I'm saying. But let's move on to the next subject.
I think that falls under another section of the bylaws that makes it clear that the chairperson of the board supervises the district manager, because we added that language a number of years ago because we needed to bring clarity to that point, that the district manager did not take direction from up to 50 board members. So I think what you're suggesting is covered under that section. But that being said, while members of the public cannot propose changes to the bylaws, you are free to lobby members of the board who can make and propose changes to the bylaws. So I think we can leave it there.
Thank you. I definitely will want to leave it there at that. I appreciate the time. And
because I was
just
personally
a
singled
second
out,
point, please.
I'd like
Let
to.
me finish my
Let
time,
her
please.
finish and then
Let me
you
finish, please. I don't want the drama. Please, I am such a person who has so much commitment right now. I don't want to deal with personal drama. Let's leave it alone. Please, I'm begging you. Please. The second issue, the nominating and election. My suggestion, my opinion, is to reduce the 2-year requirement to 1 year, because most board members will be termed out or term limited in 2027. So I think perhaps reduce the requirement of the 2-year to be, or at least if you don't want to reduce the 2-year for chair, for the other position on the executive board. And also, I think you should eliminate the nominating or election committee as a whole, because it gives the impression, in my opinion, that it's bypassing the board and it's coming off as very undemocratic. Because if that committee, as they stated at the last full board meeting, that they're not the ones that are nominating, that anyone from the floor could nominate, then what is the purpose then of being a committee? Thank you.
I would thank you, Miguel. Did you want to
And
speak?
because that went into another thing. Just because I was personally singled out, I'd like to respond. I did not personally single out anyone, nor take a cheap shot. I was making a general statement, and I just want that to be on the record. I did not call anyone out by name, and I was making a general statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
In prior meetings, you keep singling me out, but that's okay.
Okay, so
let's leave it at that.
What Roxanne was referring to was item 4 on the agenda. I want to make clear that these are not coming before the committee as a vote.
Still in the gallery session or not?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Press. Did you want to be recognized?
Yes, I've had my hand up for about 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, I haven't been looking at that. Please.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Having been on a community board for 6 years,
Oh.
having been on the bylaw committee that did a major review of the bylaws.
Get to the point, Robert.
Sandy, please.
You gave
Go
the
ahead.
first person before 10 minutes. I'd like to explain what I'm going to say. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Press.
Okay. And having been sent to other community boards to watch how they operate by certain members of the borough president's office. Okay. We have 12 different community boards that operate basically 12 different ways. On some community boards, the committee chairs are elected. On others, they're appointed by the chair of the board. On some community boards, the nominating committee is elected by the board members. The others, they're not, like here. I think that this community board should check with the borough president's office to see which way the borough president wants, because when I mentioned it to the borough president's representative 10 years ago under Borough President Diaz, I was told, don't give us extra work. I'd like to know if this borough president's going to change the situation, or if you're going to hear the answer the same thing, don't give us extra work. All right, as for the 2-year membership from becoming an officer, all right, I think also you need to check with that on the borough president's office, because I believe citywide that's been removed, that there is no more requirement of a 2-year or 1 year or any residency, that a new board member can come on and be elected chair of the board, as in other situations and other agencies. Finally, why in the bylaws, if there are no community, if on page Article 5, Section 2, page 7, committees, as far as, and I'll read it, committee chairs and chairpersons shall be members of the board, but other committee members drawn from the public need not be board members. Non-board members, and I'll just leave it at that. Why for the past 4 years has this board not had any community committee members? Now, I've been put on the housing committee, of which I thought was a community committee member, but I see that I'm in the minutes as a consultant. If I'm going to be a consultant, I will charge this board a proper fee then. And I'm going to tell this to the borough president's office. All right. So I think this board needs to do a full review of its bylaws, have a new bylaw committee set up. And I believe that you have a lot of new people who have a lot of good ideas. And I heard some today and in the past few months. Thank you.
Thank you. Miguel?
David,
Malcolm
had
was
his hand
first.
raised. I'm sorry.
Malcolm was before me.
I apologize. Malcolm, please.
Hello. I'm sorry, do you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, great. I hope you all are doing well and enjoying the new year for sure. Yeah. In essence, to the 2-year requirement, I do think that, if we're able to be appointed to the board, then we should be able to, have our full, privileges and rights and liberties as being a board member. And plus,
Miguel, you're cutting in and out. We're having trouble hearing you.
I think we may have lost Malcolm. I did want to say that I think where he was going with that is that I will actually agree with Ms. Delgado on this one. I fully believe that the 2-year rule is probably antiquated and probably meant to keep new members and new ideas from the chairmanships or any executive committee decisions. So I'd like to see that changed also. But with that, my question would that be, would I take that up with the chair again, as with the
Any bylaw change goes from the board member to the chair, and
Mhm.
then I would follow through and make sure that the chair includes it in their report at a monthly meeting, with the direction at the monthly meeting that they're now sending it to the bylaws committee for I won't say
review.
consideration, for review,
Yeah.
and then it comes through us as in the way that I described earlier.
But it goes to the so it's notified to the full board for 2 months.
No, it goes to the chair who announces it to the full board. Then it comes to the bylaws committee, and then it sits for 2 months. So let's say this is January. So if you made a request, let's say yesterday to the chair, and he gave it to the bylaws, I'm sorry, then he would have to bring it up at the January meeting. Then we would meet in February. The bylaws committee would meet, and then when it came out of committee, it would appear on the full board agenda in February, and we would vote on it in March.
Okay, great. So
Okay.
that would be the same for both things that I was.
Yes, any bylaw change follows that.
And that can come from any community board member, correct?
Correct.
All right, great. That's all.
Okay, so then I wanted to go back.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I know that there were a few people that came in. I know Joanne came in after the votes were made. Could we do a quick run through of those?
Of those what?
You want us to recap what we voted on?
A recap what? Yeah, I had to step away. I'm sorry. And I know that there were a couple board members that were not here. Just a recap of the votes that were made.
Okay. I need one moment. Jeremy, are you able to bring up the agenda? I seem to have lost it. I need a moment to get back to it.
Give me a second.
Thank you.
I apologize, Jeremy, for the extra work.
No, please. Just CC whenever you make a proposal, a bylaw proposal. CC. So,
Jeremy,
you
I think you may be having bandwidth issues. We're having trouble hearing you. Maybe I should share.
Yeah, it's probably doing two things at the same time doesn't work well. I mean, you want me to stop?
Why don't you stop sharing, and then I'll share. That way, when you talk, we'll be able to hear you.
Okay. I was just concurring with. I was just telling everybody, if you're a board member and you do propose a bylaw change, you submit it in writing to the chairperson. CC me. That way, I ensure that they bring it up, because the bylaws do require they bring it up at the next meeting. But I'm obviously, helpful in that regard.
Are you able to see the bylaws of the agenda?
Yeah. Can you zoom in though?
Yes. Is that better?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So to recap what we voted on, it was 2 changes to the bylaws. One is to strike the last paragraph of Article 11. And second is to change all masculine or feminine pronouns to gender neutral language. And both of those passed. So
thank you very much.
You're welcome. So that brings us to items that I wanted to discuss that some people have already spoken on at this meeting, which was to change the name of the Nominating and Elections Committee to the Elections Committee. In my experience, the Nominating and Elections Committee used to nominate a slate of of officers, and then we would open nominations from the floor. I would agree that that is an antiquated process. It's really a throwback to the, the old boy network of putting out the slate and then making everybody climb up the ladder of having to have to then nominate people. And then to its credit, the Nominating and Elections Committee hasn't put out a slate. They haven't made recommendations for nomination. So in effect, they've been operating as an elections committee. And that's a very important role in and of itself, because they actually conduct the elections. And when we met in person, there were physical ballots. And so it was the members of that committee who would be the only people who could touch the physical ballots. They would go to the side of the room and they would count, and then they would keep them. And that way it would be very clear, and we would know that the elections were in the hands of board members. So that was something that I wanted to put forward for discussion, and I may make the request myself to the chair of the board, but I'm going to wait until the election of a new chair. I don't think it's right to make the change through an interim chair, since the election is forthcoming in a couple of weeks. So the other, I'll just put them all out there and then we could talk about them. And then, of course, there's the 2-year membership requirement for officers. That's been around for some time. I think we've had that probably for 15, 20 years at least. Not quite sure why we have it. Bob Press, when you mentioned, that there was some sort of rule that said that this was not, allowed by city rule, if you have something in writing and you can pass it along to Jeremy, then, we'd like to see it. And if that's the case, then that'll make things go much quicker, and it may obviate the rule itself. The third was to make all officer nominations from the floor, not partly through the Nominating and Elections Committee, which is really linked to the first change. Because if you're changing the name of the Nominating and Elections Committee to Elections Committee, then you're really, making all the nominations from the floor, and also preserving the right of members to have write-in candidates. And we have always made sure that there's an opportunity for write-in candidates, because I do recall situations over the last 10 years where there were write-in candidates who won the election, and that's perfectly appropriate. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion. I'm sorry, but should I be looking for raised hands, or I'm not quite sure where to see that?
I would clarify one thing, Dave, if I can.
Yeah, please.
In my experience, nominating committee does put forth people when there's an incumbent who they know is going to run again. That's the only time it's ever been. It's not a big deal, so.
Okay.
It probably wouldn't matter either way, whatever you do.
I think I saw Malcolm's hand raised.
Yeah, you did. Sorry, do you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, cool, perfect. Yeah, so pretty much Miguel pretty much touched on what I wanted to say. I do think that, if we're able to be appointed to the board, that, we should be able to fully, exercise our privileges and rights as members of the board. And also, just from a more of an operational standpoint, considering that, depending on our board activity and the availability of board members, it's not all the time that we may have a board members or veteran board members who have 2-year plus experience that are able to operate within the executive board, capabilities. And sometimes, there are maybe people who are new to the board who may have that availability that can operate. And I think that by closing it up to 2 years, it kind of puts us at a disadvantage and not being able to fully utilize, what we can do. But also I do think that, and it also kind of sets up a old boys club, I should say, depending on, you may never know who is slated or who is, more antiquated with older members, and I do think that being able to allow new members to engage and to compete, I should say, for these positions allows it to be more transparent and more, in essence, be more of the spirit of what our community board should be.
I,
That's about it.
I appreciate what you're saying. And to put out in terms of the timeline, it's January. So if a recommended change were made to the chair and it came to the bylaws committee and then it came back to the full board for a vote and it passed, a change like that could pass in time for officer elections, which occur, each year in a process that begins in, I believe, April, and continues. Nominations continue in May, and then the election is in June. So there's time to make this change and have it be effective this year. We would not be able to make it effective for the election for chair that's taking place later this month, but we could make it in time for elections in the normal course of business. Was there anyone else who wanted to be heard on this issue?
And just to be clear, that would be for any chairmanship of
in the officer position. So chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, sergeant at arms, officers, not chairs of committees.
not chairs of committees. So chairs of committees would still be required to be 2-year members?
No, chairs of committees, I don't believe are under
No.
that rule. It's
No.
only officers that are affected by the 2-year rule.
Is that the case?
Yeah, it's
Chairs
chairs
are not
of
elected.
committees are appointed by the board, the chairperson of the board.
Okay, thank you.
There's no 2-year requirement for chairs.
Thank you.
My recommendation is that, it sounds like there may be a few changes to be made. I would recommend that each change be, to use bullet points and use a numbered list to make it absolutely clear what changes you're recommending, whether it's 1, 2, 5, 8, 10 changes, but just so that the board understands it, so that this committee can understand it. It's better to put it forward in as much detail as possible.
I have a question, David, if you don't
Yes.
mind. I just
Go ahead.
want, I do understand term limits coming up, but I'm also concerned. I think one of the reasons that 2-year membership, which may be too much at this point with term limits coming up, I think the idea is people become a little bit more, because too often we have a lot of people coming in here that don't know the process and don't know how things actually operate, which is maybe one of the challenges Yahe had, if you're familiar with his resignation. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of people coming in, like the last meeting, they were all, surprised by how the nominating elections committee was put together. That's something to think about. I don't know if anybody's concerned about that.
Naomi, did you want to speak on that?
No, I agree with Jeremy. I think that, we've been doing certain things for a while. And as a member who has been there, from the last election, the election to me went appropriately, but some people felt it didn't because they didn't have the education of, how the process goes. So I do think that we need to think about that.
I think we need to think about changes that need to be made, and I think that where clarity, needs to be brought forth, we need to do that as well. And I remember a time, and Joanne, you've served on the nominating committee for a while.
Yeah.
I remember when the nominating committee used to have a bit of a preamble and put things in context to say that we are now opening, we're beginning the elections and nominations process. It works like this. We will have it for 2 months, and we will, accept nominations, in April and in May, and then the election will be in June. This is in accordance with our bylaws. And now the following, officers are coming up for election, and then for each position, there was, we are now opening nominations. Are there any nominations? We're now closing nominations with the understanding that there will, nominations will be accepted next month. There used to be a process where that was all explained, and I think we would do well to get back to that. We need to appreciate that there are board members who are new and are interested and are motivated, and they want to, they need the context. It's not just enough to say that our bylaws are on the website, which they are, and for some people that's enough. But for other people, we need to put it out there and then say, and feel free to check what I'm saying because our bylaws are on the website. So, and Jeremy, I think you wrote a lot of that stuff, if I recall, and used to help the nominating committee, with those when it came up each year.
Yeah, I think Joanne did a great job. So the last
you.
meeting, John Johnson was the chair, but he couldn't be there. But Joanne has chaired the committee before, and I think she did a good job with the nominating, or taking nominations from the floor. But what I was bringing up is, despite that, I mean, I remember being the first chairperson election, 2012, Blanche Commerce Rifkin. She's been on the board. She was on the board since the 80s, if not 70s, and even she was like, "Oh, since when did board member, or when did our votes become public?" I don't know if I sent an email out, I think Friday, just reminding everybody that all the votes. This is a public body. All of our votes are in public. So my concern is, despite how much we put out there, it takes a little while to sink in.
Yes.
I think it's all about experience, Jeremy. It's just, it's just like job experience. If somebody is a brand new member, brand new, they're not going to have the background to know what's going on. I'm saying I think 1 year is probably very reasonable, because at least they'll get some experience. But just a brand new person, I don't think that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got, if I may say something, they have to get a feel for the board to try to
Mhm.
understand it. Yes, you wanted to be a member, but you have to be part of the workings of the board. And I think you need a little bit of time.
If I may say, I did not apply to the board until I had about like 2.5 years of just watching how things worked in a way, and I still don't have a great grasp. But then again, I've got a plethora of wonderful big brothers and big sisters that are helping me through this situation. So I think that 2 years may be a bit much. Jeremy's been a great help. But particularly with term limits, it may be prudent to bring it down to a year.
Right.
Anyone
And in a
else?
year, you could pick up a lot, and you could learn a
Sure.
lot a year if, you're open
But
to
again,
that.
I'm at this meeting because I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not on the bylaws committee, but I'd like to know how this works. And I think that, with particularly if you're active and new, I mean, if you get it, then, it makes sense to allow people an executive position.
Does anyone else like to be heard on any of these issues?
Yeah,
I can't.
I think I'll speak up again, because I mean, I am going into my second year, and one of the
Is
things that I noticed with my first year was that, I mean, other than Jeremy, like I didn't get much guidance or much communication from older or more veteran board members, right? For me, a lot of my education as being as a board member has been me going off the fly, learning off the fly, or me communicating with Jeremy about certain things. Um, which goes to say is, like, I do think that if we're expecting at the end of the day, as a veteran board member, one of the goals should be is building up the newer members to one day be able to run this board, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I do think that we need to have a more robust process in getting newer members more involved and more educated as to what the processes are to be a board member is, and not having to go off the fly. One thing that I did personally, as a board member who has served the year, was I did reach out to other newer board members, and I made friends with them, and I do discuss things with them, right? But that wasn't something that was done for me, and I do think that it should be a goal to fix that, is to ensure that we are a united board who is working to ensure that everybody is in the loop.
Right.
Mm.
I think that you have a very good point. I was wondering, how do we get that into place? Maybe we should have a mentor type program where if you're a new board member, you get you get matched with a board member that's been on the board. And that way, any questions that you have, you can go to that person and ask questions of what the process is, and where you have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of or ask questions too.
I think that's a great idea, and I think something like that could be, proposed as part or brought up as part of the election of the new chair, and asking, how, because it happens in different ways. It happens from the top down, from the chair saying, okay, matching this person up with that person, but it also starts from the ground up when somebody comes on board and says, hey, can we meet? Can I help? And can we talk? And unfortunately, for members who joined the board during the pandemic, I have to say meeting online is very, very different. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but meeting online is very different than meeting in person. Because when we're meeting in person, we have time before the meeting, after the meeting. If we were to take a break, we would be talking to each other. We would be meeting each other. We would be getting to know each other, which just is very difficult to happen online. And so I had no idea that we were going to be doing this and meeting online exclusively for 3 years. I mean, nobody knew when the pandemic started how long it was going to be, and we were worried about so many other things. But now that we're trying to live with COVID, it's like, how are we going to manage like this? Because just speaking personally, it's very, very difficult.
If I could chime in just quickly,
Yeah.
I think that Naomi really, she's one of my big sisters. So when I was saying that, like, I mean, Jeremy can only do so much. He's got
Right.
he's got a lot of people to deal with, and so I said big brothers and big sisters, and that's a very, very small group. Um, so there's not a framework for that. If we could work toward that, that would be wonderful, because there is a sense from the newer members that there's this ingrained club that if you ain't part of it, you're just not, you're just not, and you got to learn the rules, and if you don't know the rules, we know the rules, but you can't know. And I mean, it just gets to a point where it's like, well, go read the books, and I read the books, but not everybody has time to go through like the entire process. So it's helpful to have, if there's a mentor mentee kind of situation that we could figure out, that'd be great.
I hear what you're saying, and I was hoping that years ago that we would have put into the bylaws that not only do the people running for officers, and particularly chair of the board, would have to put forward a statement, which is what they have to do now, but that they would want to and welcome the opportunity to answer questions from the board members before the vote. And I was surprised that people didn't bring it up, and that it really wasn't something that the officers wanted to do. Because something like that, what you're saying, Miguel, is something that you could put to a chair and say, would you support this? How would you make a mentorship program happen? And then people would hear it, and then they would say, that's
Mr.
something.
Levin, you're giving me a lot of stuff to put to the chair.
So that's what, I mean, there's a lot there that we could make changes, but the changes have to be specific, and they have to be thought out, speaking only from my experience, rather than a wholesale change of just saying, we're changing everything in the bylaws. You have to think about what you want to do, why you want to do it, and then follow it through. With that, I'll ask one last call if anybody else would like to be recognized. I'm sorry, I have trouble seeing here if people have their hand raised, so I apologize if.
No, nobody has their hand raised to my knowledge.
Okay,
David,
so Does anyone want to be recognized? Because otherwise I will move on. We've done the gallery session, and I'll ask if there's any old business, any new business. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn, but before that, I want to thank everyone for joining the meeting tonight, and thank you for your input. And I hope that if there are changes forthcoming, that you'll continue to participate, because that's how the best changes are made.
And David, I just want to thank you for chairing this committee. Ever since I've been here, you've done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I second that.
Thank you. So with that,
So you don't need a motion, David, because it's a committee, not a board meeting, so you can just end it whenever you want.
Okay, well, I don't want to do it unilaterally. So if there's no objection, then I will adjourn the meeting. It is 7:03 p.m. and I'll wish everyone a good evening.
Thank you.
Same to you,
Good night.
David.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
Night,
David,
Ellie.
thank you. Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year, everyone.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Right.